Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a celebration of life for John Richards, a young man whom all of us knew and loved and respected, and he has impacted the lives of everyone in this room and beyond. And before we start with this celebration of life, a life that was well lived by Mr. Richards, and he's touched everyone in this room, especially me, dating back to 1999, and I'll have more to share later on. So with that, let us pray. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come and remember a great American, a great citizen of Gwinnett, a great citizen of the state of Georgia. And Father, we thank you for the lives that he's touched in such a positive way, knowing that he dwelled on the positive even until the end. Father, we just thank you for him gracing us with his presence for the time that he was with us. Let us remember those positive things that he imparted in all of us, and he will forever live on with us, knowing that he led the way for many of us. And Father, we thank you, and we ask you to continue to stand with this family as they go through this time, knowing that you can carry them through, and they will be able to survive and look back upon the legacy that John has left for them and us. This we pray in your Son's name. Amen. Amen. As I commence these celebration services, I just want to say what an honor it is for the family, Charlie, to have me to lead off this celebration of life for one great American. As I remember John, meeting him back in 1999, and John always imparted positive things in my life. When I set out on the campaign trail in Snellville, City Council, and then I set out on the campaign trail for State House Representative here in the state of Georgia. And John would always encourage me, Melvin, you can do this. All the while he had that camera taking photos. Melvin, you can do this. Because of that encouragement, I was successful to become city council and become state rep and to serve in the governor's administration. And all of that time I saw John in various settings, whether it was the Gwinnett Chamber, the Republican Party, or any other entity in Gwinnett County. John had his camera and he was ready. And I shared many photos of John was shared on Facebook, and oh my God, I said, what collage of photos from across this state and across this nation. I would love to have known what his budget was for all of those photos he took. I'm telling you, everybody in this room here, I think, pretty much had a photo with John. Pretty much everybody. Senator P.K. Warren, former Commissioner Mike Boudreaux, former Secretary of State Karen Handel, and Representative Buzz Brockway. I could go on and on and on. He took photos of everyone, and they were happy photos, and everyone was delighted to see John come and share in those glorious times with his photos. And he was always happy, never sad, and I never saw him with a frown on his face. And when I visited him in the hospital, he was saying, Melvin, I'll be all right. So to the family, I want you all to know, thank you so much to Mom for raising such a fine American who put everything else above him to make sure those that were around him were taken care of in the proper and respective way. So thank you all so much. My prayers are with you as this typical time continues for you, knowing that it will be able to be better for you. Just hold on to the memories and the legacies that John left. Thank you all so much.
Hello, my name is Ann Richards McFall, and I live in Sarasota, Florida. I'm John's younger sister by 11 years, in case you were wondering. I'm also the mom of his favorite and only nephews, Cal, Matthew, and Stuart. We grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, And as my older brother, I worshiped him. I even wanted to bring him to school for show and tell. He played with me all the time, and I was devastated when he announced he was leaving for 4 years to go to college. As I grew older, I admired his ability to help people, organize events, and to create or fix things. He was always curious and loved learning how things work. In fact, this started very early on. In kindergarten, he taught himself how to tell time. He had an early interest in photography, so my dad built him a darkroom in our basement. He had a newspaper route. He organized fairs in the backyard and invited all the neighborhood kids. He set up separate booths that include food and fun houses and games of skill. Ever the entrepreneur, he took pictures of the moon landing in 1969 on the TV screen, made prints, and went door to door selling them. My parents bought him one of the first commercially available computers, a K-Pro, and his love for technology took off from there. He was early on in the software, internet, and website wave, and while we weren't really sure what he did, he seemed to be doing okay, so we didn't ask too many questions. Fast forward some years, he always drove to Sarasota to spend Christmas with my family and my mom and my sister Amy. He made Christmas for my boys. When John arrived, wearing his button-down plaid polo shirt, the party started. He played games like checkers and blockers with my boys and made the mashed potatoes for Christmas dinner. Usually, and this will make sense for people that know John, we kind of had to find a project to keep him busy. So he put together basketball hoops and ping pong tables, fixed computers, installed new TV sets, and set up games like the Wii. He loved to help, and of course did these without complaint. Social media in general can have its drawbacks, but one nice thing it did for us as a family, it allowed lots of people from all over the Southeast, from all walks of life, to share the stories with us about John. Well, we really appreciate people taking time out of their busy day to say, explain these stories to us and really give us a lot more insight into what he was doing, with all the relationships he made here in Georgia. On the back of the program, there's a poem called The Dash. I don't know if everyone's gotten a chance to skim it, but honestly, when all these stories poured in from everywhere, I thought, wow, he did a lot with his dash. On behalf of the family, we'd like to thank you for your prayers and support.
Hey, my name is Will. I have the challenge of trying to figure out how to word what John Richards meant to many young people everywhere into a little speech, and I found that's nearly impossible. He meant a lot. I first met John. I was a freshman in college, believe it or not. He was the third person in the state of Georgia I ever met. Quite the introduction. He and I went out to lunch, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "What do you want to do with your life?" I was an 18-year-old freshman in college. Didn't know what I was going to even study. I didn't know what I was going to have for dinner besides the different flavors of ramen noodle. And he asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And fast forward, all these years later, he was still asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up. So the very last time he asked me that was a few weeks ago, and I said I want to win. Now, I don't actually know what that means. He didn't know what it meant either, but that's what I said, and he just quickly decided to move on from that conversation and ask me about the Obamacare repeal. So after going through the Obamacare repeal spiel, we left. And I never got to answer him what exactly to win means. And he taught me what it meant to win. When he died, I read all of your stories about John and how much it meant to me. He meant a lot to me. And I read all your stories, and I realized he won. He won at life whenever we think of John, we're filled with happiness, filled with love, with caring. And that's what John did. He took a multitude of young people under his wing and taught them that in life, the way you win is by caring, respecting, and loving people. And there's a generation of young people, young leaders, people that are going to be our ministers, our politicians, our business leaders, our community leaders, that have a little bit of John in them. They have that need to love on people, and they have that need to care. There's just no way to really describe what all he meant for all of us as young people. I've gotten messages from people that I'd never met John before, but were young people in places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Maryland, you name it, people that had just connected with John over social media. And he talked to them and he mentored them. And he cared about us like we were his children. The other day, my dad sent me a screenshot, some messages John had sent him, just saying how proud of me that my dad should be. And John always went that extra mile with young people. We were his kids. So whenever people call us his kids, it's pretty accurate. We were his kids. He cared for us like we were his kids. He taught us like we were his kids, and he loved on us like we were his kids. There's one time in particular that I was having a really just rough time in general in life. And I just called John, and I said, "Hey, John," and then just bust out into tears. I mean, y'all, I was like ugly crying for similar to this now. For about 30, 45 minutes, something like that. And he just sat there and listened to me just cry. And then after I was done, he said, are you finished? And I said, I think. And then he started asking me what's wrong. And he just listened. And he just listened. So there's one thing an entire generation of young leaders have gotten from John: to shut your mouth and to listen. And when you do open your mouth, to ask a question, to learn something more. So John really instilled so much in young people. And for the rest of our lives, for years and years to come, there's going to be a little bit of John everywhere. And that's why he won. 70 years from now, he's still going to be here. And I think that's a victory. So thank you guys so much for sharing a wonderful person with us and for allowing us to learn from him. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Will. As it's hopefully clear by now, if you're in the right room, we're here to celebrate the life of Jonathan Blair Richards, or as we all know him, John. And if you ever and frequently had to write his name, let's be clear, that's John, no H. Been corrected on that more than once. Let the record reflect, finally got it down. Thank you all for coming. The response to John and outpouring of support since his illness became public has been great. As has been noted, the volume of notes, cards, messages, all forms of well wishes were quite literally overwhelming. And there's multiple meanings of that word, and the family and those of us close to the situation this week have really felt that. When you have this much caring outpouring at once, it really can be overwhelming, and it has been. And it was, in fact, a rough week at the end of a rough several months. But again, we're here to celebrate, and so we're going to do that with John. And I think the family has now come to grips with the fact that John was a public figure, as demonstrated by this room and several official proclamations that were delivered to them on the way in the door, and various speeches that have been made on John's behalf over the last couple of weeks. But we're going to start back at the beginning of John's journey, where he wasn't always that public figure. He was a son. He was a brother. He grew up bouncing around various corners of Ohio before finally graduating high school in Cincinnati. Ann was telling me about how she didn't quite get the memo that people went away to college, so it just seemed like one day it was announced that I'm going to college in Pennsylvania, and then John started another life, kind of. And that's, if you're 5-ish at that time, that's, I'm sure, how it would seem. But John's journey and his path wasn't always to be a public figure. John did things his way. And let's be honest, John was different. And John's always been different. And the world isn't always kind or nice to different people, especially when you're young, especially when you're trying to figure out what different means. The world, while we say that we value what is unique and special, is horrible about trying to force everyone to conform into something that's not different. John didn't conform. John stayed different. His journey was all about being different. And so, when John came out of college, got a communications degree at Allegheny College in Allegheny, Pennsylvania, he followed a friend down to Georgia, because Georgia at the time was different. It definitely was not Ohio and Pennsylvania. And he had the great fortune of moving next door to Pat and Danny Dobbs. Actually, I think across the street. I've been saying next door this whole time. But they knew John was different. He wasn't from around there, but he was treated welcome. They were his welcome wagon, and they became his family. And they have been, and that's become evident as well. John's family grew when he left and came to Georgia. It did not get smaller. And look around this room, boy, did it grow. Last week, it seemed like it was still growing very, very rapidly. I can assure you of that. But as the family grew, got into politics, got into civic things, I don't think there is a single civic organization in Gwinnett County that John is not the official photographer of, volunteer of the year, those kinds of things. He's had me come to several organizations I couldn't even name the name of because I had to ask him 3 times. Am I the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce? No, this is the Snellville something or other. Okay. John said show up, you show up. It's what we do. And as I've gotten to know John and know that we all many of us in this room know, we didn't know the Pat and Danny version of the job, of John, but if you want to get to know John, you need to ask them about standing poker nights and golf junkets to Jekyll Island. Especially younger kids that are now smiling. Yes, that John, serious, are you done crying now, John? He was young once and has had many good times over the years. For the family, it's very clear, as you said, he was Uncle John. I know about pumpkin carvings. I know that there is an order to the way presents are to be given out under a tree. Only John knows that order. I hope he wrote it down somewhere so that y'all will be able to understand the only way presents are to be given out under a tree. But there are rules in life, and John believed in some rules, and apparently that was one of them. But I can say, last year, I know he didn't get to go this year, but we used to have a weekly radio show on Fridays, and all they talked about, the last one we did before the holidays, both during the breaks and eventually on air, was the car was loaded up, and he was leaving there, and he was headed to Sarasota, because there are rules, and spending time with the family, even though he had moved away almost 40 years ago, he never left that part of what he left in Ohio that had since spread out. So, bring John to what we do here and what we do, but he had his family that he stayed close with. He met a new family that was the personal, where he lived every day, that you don't get to see when you're in the social organizations. And then he had the rest of us. And that's where I come in to start to tell the story, because what we do when you go to a chamber-ish event, a civic organization, a political organization, the relationships we form, we know a lot of people, but we know them on the very surface. We do what's called a grip and grin. And there's meaning hi, pretend someone's special, and you move on to the next almost special person. John and I had probably a similar thing where we didn't particularly care for people much, but John very much liked individual persons. In large crowds, it can be overwhelming, especially if most of us that write or blog can be said to be extroverts. John was a bit of an introvert. That was part of his being different. But John got over that and was always in a crowd because he didn't ever see a crowd. He wasn't there to grow, and he wasn't there to grin. He was there to form meaningful, personal, individual relationships. And after he had conducted his business affairs and did quite well, he was able to retire, and he made that his life's work. Most of us had no idea. We talked to John regularly. Now that I've heard the stories myself over the last few months, John had a regular rotation that was a full-time job plus. He worked overtime of regular meetings with many of the same people, repetitively over and over, doing what Will just said. He didn't show up to talk, he showed up to listen and to learn and to treat every individual that he met with like he was special. And because this is a service of celebration, that is something we must celebrate about John Richards, of turning people into persons. And that's something that the majority of us that live in those same circles, that's first lesson for all of us. Perhaps none of these relationships are more evident than the ones John named with the teen and college Republicans, and yes, for those of you that are not aware, also some Democrats. I know some names. John has been shown, he understood that you guys had potential. And I'm going to be honest here, I've argued with him about that, specifically for some of you. We continue to argue about that over some of you over the last couple of months. We've got decisions on most of you. Others, not so much. But John found out something he knew and he remembered from 40 years ago. Every one of you are different. Some of you a little more different than I can handle, but somehow he did. Because he remembers what it's like to be different. John owned different, and what he wanted for all of you, his kids, is to own your difference. To see the potential of what you could do by being different. To not try to be what everyone else is being while you're in the worst part of peer pressure in your life, because here's a secret if no one else has told you, this part's going to suck. Peer pressure never goes away, especially if you're in the political world. Own your differences. That's what John would want from you. So, to give some background for those of you that John has treated like you're special, let me kind of frame something and give a representative example of how this is an email I got one of the last days that John was over at the hospice. And it was from someone that wanted to share something with him. And so I didn't tell Doug I was going to read this. I'm not sure if he's here or not, but I'm going to read it. Hey John, it's Doug. Mandy and I were talking about some fun times we had back in Samna Lotus days. I still tell people about the day I walked into the Samna office without an appointment, and you happened to be walking by the front desk and invited me in for an interview. It was my first interview after graduating from UGA, and I wasn't sure how it was going until you told me to come back the next day for a second interview. But wear something other than tennis shoes and shorts. I'm so glad you saw through my inexperience and hired me. It was the luckiest day of my professional career. You're a great first boss. You made work fun every day when we worked 12 to 14-hour days. I can't remember, was it you or Mike Kroom that invented Shaky the Cow? I've got to ask about that. I didn't do that in the reply email. Just another way we found fun testing printer drivers, something no one else would enjoy at all. Everyone looked forward to Christmas so we could come get some of your mom's homemade hard candy. Your Christmas parties left lasting memories as well. I remember the year you introduced us to Wassel. This is starting to sound like the poker games. I remember very well, but I'm sure Rhett doesn't remember anything. I think the fourth glass erased the entire evening from his memory. Rhett, if you were here or around, I want to hang with you guys. iPhones and Amazon's Alexa may be convenient, but I still remember the nights, again, this is John we're talking about, where we would listen to Quadrophenia, Dark Side of the Moon, or some Zeppelin on Reel to Reel. That was the way albums were meant to sound. And a beer or two made them that much better. What about the marketing meetings? Well, we'd eat and go do some real work for a while, then we'd try and I guess which employee would be the next to quit or get fired. We got pretty good. John could analyze anything and find a pattern, I tell you. At one point, I started to believe if we mentioned the name while eating fried cheese at Applebee's, their fate was sealed. Well, I'll shut up now and let you get some rest. I just want to tell you what a great friend you are and have always been. Now, for some of you younger people that didn't quite get the references in there with things like Samna or Lotus, that's not a car that we're talking about, or know what Quadrophenia or Dark Side of the Moon is. That was a letter written to John from someone he hired in 1986. John has been treating young people that he saw potential in, but might need to change their clothes or get a haircut or whatever other, we won't go there, I know stories. John's been able to see through that. So the grooming of you guys isn't something he just started. It's not something he just started in retirement. It's been part of his professional life to see different, but to see potential when he saw it. And that's who John is. Now let's be clear, John was also a very private person. That's why a lot of you have been sharing that you were totally surprised to learn that he was ill. We shared as much as I felt he was comfortable sharing, but clearly the last 3 months were a challenge for John. But as I said, he's got the folks here that even though it was private, one-on-one individually, he was quite personal. But in his privateness, a lot of us always kind of wondered, what is John really up to? This guy that's doing all these things and is every event and taking pictures of her. That's the only one we could find. He's actually, I think that's a selfie that's going. I'm not sure if he's taking a picture of someone else, but I felt it most appropriate to have a picture up there that even if John didn't take, shows that he was even a photographer of himself. But it was never about himself or John. And so, in terms of what John was really up to, I'm going to tell a story that comes from my political past about one of my earliest lessons in politics when I met Representative John Yates down in Griffin, Georgia. And he was revered by the people that kept electing him. And I asked him one day why that was so, because at the time Speaker Murphy was doing everything he could to get him out of the Georgia General Assembly. They would put things in the budget just to strip it, to show the good people of Griffin how much they weren't getting from the state, so that they'd send a good Democrat up there instead of John Yates, a World War II veteran. And John Yates, Representative Yates, put his arm around me and said, "Charlie, it's like this in politics. Wise man once told me before I got down to that Capitol, you don't let them know you want nothing. Because as soon as they know you want something, they own you. So I just go down there every time and I don't want nothing. And that's what I get." Nobody owned John. Nobody owned Jonathan Blair Richards. John, no age. He was fiercely independent as he was different. But I don't tell you that story to talk about John's motivation, but his selflessness. When our group of writers, bloggers, reporters, whatever we call ourselves these days, decided we were going to leave the other outfit, I tried to talk individually, sit down with every one of the folks that were our kind of leadership team, group of editors, to find out what they wanted, to make sure there was no misunderstanding going into this new group, so that everyone could know if they needed a business model created out of it, whatever they wanted. Why are you blogging? If you're doing something for free, got to know what you want out of it. So I would know as the person putting this together, everybody ultimately could get what they want, or if we needed to talk about it. John told me everything we could do with the new site, how we could make it better, faster, whatever. John gave me technical specs. John gave me great ideas. John gave me a way to increase our reach. He built websites. He was quite successful at that. He kept telling me that. I said, "No, John, the question is, what do you want out of it? I'll have to think about that." "Okay, we'll think about it. Let's talk." We regrouped. "What do you want?" I thought if we did this, we could get so many more readers, or we would own this part of the reporting. "Okay, John, what do you want?" "I'm good." "John, you got to want something." John didn't want that. John wanted that because of all the relationships he formed that gave him a way to tie them all together. John was reaching peak different. All those individual relationships, all the things he knew how to do, it gave him a way to become not the private John that all of us know, but a very public person that never wanted to be a public figure and frankly wasn't comfortable with it. He loved sitting and talking with us on radio. Asked me if we wanted to go on TV one time. I never asked again. He loved being in the back room. He wanted to be in the back room because that's where you could sit and talk and form a relationship. Cameras changed that. He knew that too. So I think his personal life was much the same. I'll go ahead and say it. I know he had strong views on religion, and I know what his personal views were. We talked about those conversations a lot over the last 90 days too. John did believe in God. He was good with God. John was not a person who wears religion outwardly on his sleeve. Especially when we write about it in politics, John and I kind of have that same opinion. We don't like to mix the two. John, in any debate, religious, civic, or otherwise, wanted to put the facts on the table, let the best person doing the best debate win, and let you decide what's right for yourself. He didn't bring that in and use religion as a club, as it's often done. He believed something much, much more important. John lived his religion. If you look at the stories of selflessness that you've heard both on the internet, what you've heard from the small samples we picked, what I imagine you're going to hear after I shut up and we let y'all share some of your own stories about John. John knew how to walk a walk in such a way that is much more glorious than anyone I know has ever talked that talk. He was good with God, and I have to believe God was good with him, even if his observation of religion might be a little untraditional for a Deep South reader base. But John didn't just teach kids. John taught us all, whether we knew it or not, whether we were open for the lesson or not, and whether we were struggling to let him teach us. And yes, now I'm talking about me, because the last 90 days were pretty difficult. I didn't know what I was getting into at the beginning, because John didn't tell us. I think John knew. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time. And many of y'all have reached out personally to me. Let me be very clear. I didn't do anything for John by myself. At times I felt kind of like a quarterback, but then I realized the player on the field was sitting that day. I was at best a minor coach, but we had a team of folks that not one person ever asked to do anything for John, said no. It was just frankly too difficult to figure out what he needed. Because John hurt, he was sick, and all we wanted was for him to first get well, and if that was not, to quit hurting. That's above my pay grade and anyone else I knew who to call and ask, except for one. And those prayers were continuous. They weren't answered the way we wanted, but all prayers are answered. I do believe that. But along that 90-day journey, where I first fought, I wasn't necessarily happy about it. There were days I really didn't like driving across the top-end perimeter at rush hour to go through Spaghetti Junction, which we have some Metro Chamber here. Get on that. I gave you 6.5 cents per gallon to do something. But I went from the first times where trying to deal with a medical bureaucracy, I've written a little bit about it, there is nothing pleasant about it. It really dehumanizes the entire thing when all you really care about is the human that you're trying to make better. But after some original visits with doctors' offices and nursing homes, Kelly Beasley was here from Del Mar Gardens a little bit, but eventually while you're sitting in there, the one thing, and I said this out loud to John more than once, all this is really about is God is trying to once again teach me patience. And I'm still not sure the lesson took. But I will tell you that a nurse that I was once on the phone with trying to understand why it had been 2 weeks to get in to see an oncologist, ultimately by the time it was over, when I called her, I knew to ask, do you have 3 people standing at your desk right now that you're trying to check out, make follow-up appointments, change appointments for CT scans because something changed over the weekend, all the while knowing that she has a 26-year-old special needs son at home that she's taking care of. I know that the person I was trying to coordinate transportation to and from Del Mar Gardens that couldn't quite make the schedule work actually just finished up 2 weeks before John got to Del Mar with her own chemotherapy at that exact same clinic, and she made it through. And I know that Sandy, that was taking care of John at Del Mar, has to drive a worse drive than I have every day because she lives in Woodstock, Georgia, to get home to an 18-month-old son that also had a brief illness, minor stuff, kid stuff, while I was in there. But that's not the kind of thing you learn if you're in an office to do a grip and grin, or you want to get to the front of the line because somebody you know is sick. It's the kind of thing you learn because you had to sit because God made you to be quiet, to understand there's something else going on that you don't like, you don't understand, and you want to fight. But there were times that family and I, towards the end, quite frankly, asked why John was hanging on as long as he was. It was clear that it was over. But John, being different, decided he was going to go on the day he wanted to go, and not until he was ready. But I think it was really more not until he thought we were, because we couldn't convince him that we knew there was still work to be done. He had been a good and faithful servant, and it was up to us to pick it up from here. But I think he still held out an extra day because he was still praying that I was going to learn patience along the way. John did it his way. He did it well. And this is the final celebration, and it better be a celebration when we walk out of here for a truly remarkable, different man. John's work is done. John's pain is gone. And my friend John, he don't want nothing. with that, we're going to do what every politician in charge of an event fears in a room full of somewhat politicians. We're going to do open mic. So, Rob, if you've got that. Right. Feedback. Anyone would like to say something? We've got a couple of minutes to say what you feel.
Can I stand up?
You may. Hold that. Feedback.
Let's see, this is gonna be tough, but I've known John for, I guess, 30 years. He's the most intelligent, most knowledgeable, and most generous person. I think John and I made a lot of trips, and the first one we ever took was to San Diego, California, to see my daughter. And John, he took care of all that. And we stopped, let's see, in Las Vegas on the way home. And thanks to John, again, we came home not broke. But John taught me a lot. Like Charlie said, we went to Jekyll Island quite a few times, played a lot of golf. Neither one of us were great at it, but we enjoyed it. John loved Jekyll Island. And one summer, our whole family went, and John helped take care of that. So thank you, John. One of the things I really enjoyed doing with him was just sitting down. Some days, there was times when John and I would sit for 5-6 nights a week and just talk about issues. And sometimes, you know, it was just the neighborhood. Sometimes it was Gwinnett County. And sometimes it was the state of Georgia, the whole United States, the world, and sometimes even the outer space. We really did. We spoke about so many things. And we'd sit there and have a couple of drinks, and John, he actually listened to me sometimes. I don't know if it's because he was just trying to think I knew what I was talking about, or maybe because he really thought I knew what I was talking about. But John helped me more than anybody could begin to imagine. And one time I said, well, I owe you, John, for this. And he'd say, just mow my grass the rest of your life. I'm serious. That's what he told me. And so I'll never be able to thank him enough. And I guess I'll have to ask him for one more thing. And I'm pretty sure that there are golf courses in heaven. So get a tee time, and I'm in no hurry to get up there with you, but I know I will one of these days. And so get a tee time, and we'll have some fun. Thank you, John.
Who would like to say a couple words? What's that? We've already done that. Okay. No, battery might be out because it was on. There we go. All right. We'll try it this way. Okay. Take two. Mr. Boudreaux.
I guess I'll speak on behalf of all the candidates he's helped over the years. I guess I'm somewhere in that dash for him between you guys and some of the folks before me. But I met John downstairs in the very first room on the right as you come in the Chamber of Commerce. I guess it was 2003. I'm losing track a little bit, but I said, you know, I'd really be obliged if you'd help out. He said, well, I'll take a few pictures and maybe write a few things on a website, or do you have a website? I said, not really, what's a website? he just jumped right in there and helped. And before you knew it, he was doing everything he could. I think he even knocked on a few doors for me. And if you know John, he did not like to knock on doors. He's an introvert, as we talked about. So I just want to thank the family for the gift you gave us, and how very thankful we are of that. And that he really was a special character. And he was just as likely to tell you you're wrong than you're right. To keep you accountable and on your toes. And that's the kind of a real friend, particularly in politics, that we need nowadays. So I'm just very appreciative of that, and thank you all for coming out tonight to support my friend.
Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
Hi, folks. I'm Randy Meacham, and I have, it's sort of a different relationship with John. I first met him around 2008 on a Chamber Strategic Leadership visit. Got to know him over the years, and then had the privilege of being in Leadership Gwinnett with John for the class of 2011. I see a lot of folks here representing that. And I don't want to give away, I guess I shouldn't give away secrets of how Leadership Gwinnett works, but there is a team bonding event that takes place toward the end of the program. And John and I were attempting to do something that was strenuous and scary, and both of us bailed out of it. And we wound up sitting together on a picnic bench, talking to each other. And from that day forward, I think I had a special bonding, like a sub-bond for Leadership Gwinnett with John Richards. And I've treasured that. And I'm going to miss him. And I appreciate all of you and all these faces here tonight. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Jody Campbell. I'm also one of John Richards' Leadership Gwinnett classmates, and I know we're not supposed to give away too many secrets, but I want to share a real quick story, kind of the lasting memory I'll have of John. One of the things that we did in the program was we were debating whether or not Briscoe Field here in Gwinnett County should be privatized. That was kind of a hot button issue at the time. And they divided us into groups. There was the citizens group who was opposed to it, and then there was the business group that was in favor of it. John was appointed the speaker on behalf of the business group. So he had to present a 10-minute presentation about why it should be done. And he spent the first 5 minutes of those 10 minutes lamenting the fact that me and Don Swift, two lawyers, were on the other side and were arguing against him. That was part of our strategy. It worked. But that moment, John was brilliant. He was a treasure trove of information. And he knew more than I'll ever possibly know. He forgot more than I could ever possibly know. And in today's world, I often lament about just how divisive we are in politics and in religion and in all walks of life. We seem like we're in a very hostile world. And I know that as a lawyer, heck, every day I get into an argument with somebody and I walk away and I'm mad at that person. I'm mad at them for disagreeing with me. I got into a lot of debates with John Richards about a lot of different things. I can't say I ever walked away from an argument with him being mad at him. He taught me, and I think he taught all of us, how to disagree without being disagreeable. I say that's impossible nowadays, and John proved me wrong. And that's the lesson of John's life, and that's what I'll take away, and I hope that's what we all take away, is that you can stick to the facts, you can disagree, but you can still respect the person on the other side, because we're all in this together.
Thank you. Got a couple up front. Way back that way.
My name is Derek Corbett. I'm Rob Woodall's Chief of Staff. And John was my very good friend. And I knew John was my friend because he was my friend back when I was just a driver. And so when somebody hangs out with the driver, you know they really care about you. John and I had lots of coffees and lots of lunches and lots of me being cornered in my office while he gave me advice and enlightened me. I'm not going to lie to you, that happens a lot. But rare is the case that every time I walk out of one of those visits, I am smarter, I am more prepared, and I have learned something that wasn't on the radar screen at all. John was there for us. I remember back in 2002 stomping around with John when Linder was running against Barr, and I thought, my God, I'm in my 20s, this dude will not slow down. I got to go, man. Come on, it's just a few more signs. Well, all right, if you're up for it, you sure you got it? Okay, John, let's go. And that's how it was, all the way up until 2010 when Rob Woodall was the 8th candidate in an 8-way primary. And I called John and I said, hey, you know, this is about to happen. And he said, I'm with you. And I said, you might be the only one, John. And he said, that's all right, we'll get some more to come with us. And he was right. And he was there at the beginning of that parade, carrying the flag stick. And I say this very sincerely, none of it would have happened without his leadership and mentorship. He was there for Rob from day one. Rob loves him dearly, just like I do, and Deborah does. And he's the kind of guy who, you know, when the favor comes, when he needs it, you got to say yes. And you just pray it never does. Because you can't say no. You got to find a way to crack that egg. And so the day came. It was back in 03. I remember very clearly John comes through the door, unannounced, and he said, hey, you got a minute? I said, oh, yeah, man, come on back. And I'm thinking we're going to talk politics. He's got a very somber look on his face. And he said, I need to ask you something. And it's a big ask. And I thought, oh, God. You know, your brain races. I thought, here it comes. It's big. It's going to be hard. Who knows what kind of ethics rules I'm going to have to break to bend this thing. It's going to be awful. And he's looking right at me, and I'm looking right at him. He said, my neighbor's in really bad shape. And I said, your neighbor? Yeah, let me tell you what's going on. And then the only thing he has ever asked for in return for the generosity, the effort, the knowledge he has imparted, and everything else was to help his friend who was in a jail. And obviously we were proud to do it, and I'm going to miss him dearly. And we're probably all going to spiral downhill now.
If you kids were paying attention, let me just say something to you. Will, if you were a better driver, you'd be chief of staff right now.
Charlie was absolutely right. Young people are useless. But it was John's job to make us a little less useless. I wanted to talk a little bit about his mentorship of young people. I met him 4 years ago when I was a teen Republican, and you're like, those exist? Yes, they do, and they think very highly of themselves, but no one else does. But John, for some reason, held that opinion of young people. And I remember meeting him at the GAGO convention, and he took my ideas and my opinions seriously. And I had very little vested interest in the kinds of issues that most people in this room care about, but he still ensured that my stake in the game was heard. I just want to share a couple anecdotes about other people that have been impacted, sort of young people that need his mentorship, and how much they mean to John. I know one individual from College Republicans who met her future husband in College Republicans. He got to know both of them very well. And John's not a flashy guy, but they wanted to have sort of a flashier wedding. And it was going to be very Southern, seersucker themed. So John went out and bought himself and got himself fitted for a seersucker suit just for this event. Drove down to Savannah, Georgia in the middle of the summer and enjoyed that outdoor wedding. That's the kind of extra mile John would go. And you know, he had a very important online presence which enabled him to reach more young people across the country. And there was this guy who's running for a College Republican office nationwide. And he and I had talked to him, College Republican, but he texted me and offered me his condolences to the family about John. I was like, how do you know John Richards? You live in Maryland. And he said, well, I was told that if there was someone in Millennial Whisper, that this guy's the guy to talk to. So he had direct message people on Twitter, trying to go through the chain of contacts to try to get John's number. And finally obtained it. And then cold called John. It was like, hey John, I heard you're the guy to talk to about this issue. And John told him what he thought about the issue for 3 hours. This individual knew nothing about John. He didn't care about Georgia politics, but he knew John put a lot of value and a lot of stake in young people. And when he sought advice, he knew the guy to go to across the whole nation was John Richards. And so he had a 3-hour-long conversation, and John imparted some wisdom, I'm sure, in those 3 hours. And I feel like I didn't absorb enough of that wisdom, and I took him for granted. I took him as a constant in politics. I think a lot of us did. And I just want to let you know that young people everywhere who've been mentored by him will never forget the kind of contributions he made in their lives. Thank you.
Anyone? I see movement.
So Will talked about ugly crying. We're putting on a clinic on that today. I'm at so John, for me, when I decided that the only thing I was good at was politics, started that in college, got involved in UGA College Republicans, and I never met John before. And I'd read him every day. He's one of those people that you read, if you're wanting to be involved in state politics. He came to the meeting, and he was kind of an intimidating person, because, this guy, he writes about all these things. He has so much knowledge about the issues, I'm just a young kid who doesn't really know anything. I said this the other day, and it keeps playing over and over in my mind, that as a young person, you're not exactly sure how many people God is going to give you in your life that take time daily to invest in you. How many people can you count? Can you fill up one hand? Can you fill up two hands? I said a prayer this morning that thank God that John was one of my people. In 2015, on the driver thing, so I was an intern in a state legislative office. I can still recite to you the 6 lunch orders that I would get every day. I was the least favorite person of the sandwich lady in the Coverdale Legislative Office building, because she knew if I was walking towards her, I was sweating. I had my neck tie undone, that I had 6 sandwich orders, that legislators were then going to be behind me and be very, I want my sandwich, but she had to take care of my 6 sandwiches. I was always deathly scared of this, because a couple of times I would get in front of chairman, and that's, John had breakfast with me every day. Every day, he had breakfast, would talk to me, and some of my thoughts would be like, well, Cody, I don't really know if that's true, or if I agree, but would then go into John had this weird way of, when you would ask him a question, or tell him something, he would then ask you a question. And I guess I'd never talked to someone who took that much time to think through things and would take the time to ask the questions, ask me what I thought. And they kind of look at me kind of weird whenever I would answer it, like, what is that? So I just, when I walked in today, I know so many people here, or at least your faces, and I thought, seeing all these people that you know by face, the one person who isn't here is John. Like I said earlier, I don't know how many servants God is going to put in my life. But I'm going to remain thankful that John was one of mine, that repeatedly took time to invest in me when I didn't really I'm nothing special. But he took that time. I think that's John's ministry to us all.
I think we got room for one more. It's right down front. Very special, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny, and for those of us that write on the website, John knew everybody, and he knew where everything was. And all it took was one email saying one question, and you would get back an email with links and commentary. But I'm gonna keep mine really short. You know, all these young faces have talked about how John mentored them. John mentored all of us in his own way, and I'm really gonna miss him.
Thank you. Since that was short, I'm going to revise and extend our remarks and let the distinguished senator and John's insurance agent, who came bearing a letter from the governor, if I'm not mistaken, on his hand. So yeah, PK, you get to talk.
Thank you. I really had no idea what I would say, and so I'm kind of glad I went last because it kind of helped me figure it out. I don't know the exact day that I met John. I know where I met him. I met him at the Gwinnett GOP. I know that I was a very inexperienced city council member who said if I'm going to be in politics, I need to be involved with people that I tend to mostly agree with. We weren't close initially. We didn't talk a lot. But I remember one year I had a pretty tough race because he didn't live in Lawrenceville. Why does he care about Lawrenceville politics? The next morning, we were victorious, which oftentimes when you're victorious, you shouldn't go pick up signs at night. And the next morning, I'm working, getting ready to go do some signs. I got a phone call, and John said, well, I was picking up some signs, and I got a few of yours, and he had almost all of them. I didn't have to get very many. And I think like a lot of people in this room, he was volunteering for us, and we didn't even know it. And from that point on, we were friends, and he became a customer, a client. He was always a friend. And 2 years ago, I said, John, will you come down to the Capitol and take some pictures of my family and I as I'm sworn in? And he agreed, of course, right? And he was down there, and he's on the Senate floor, and he's like, I've never been on the Senate floor doing this before. And he was loving it. And he goes, I want to go on the House floor. And he said, but I have to get a press pass to do that. And I said, well, let's get you a press pass then. And there's a whole section right about, not so much there, not there, they're right there, that really for the last couple of years have been his family, and I know his dearest friends, and he loved being officially a part of the press and having that. And it did change, because I remember being in committee meeting and looking at him for some information that I thought I had right to get some assurance, and he didn't budge. He didn't tell me I was going the wrong way. He was just sitting there ready to record what I was about to say. There he is. There he is. John was a great guy. The governor did write a letter. He could not be here, obviously, today being the eve in which he kicks us out of the Capitol, and we don't get to mess with the executive branch any longer. But I did look at the letter, and I read the letter, and he never really truly worked on Governor Deal's campaign. He worked on Jack Kingston's campaign, but they were at many similar events. And he touched, just the letter was such a personal note about who John was and about his service, about how he was stability, and how he was just somebody who was always there doing the work that needed to be done, and really brought everybody together. He was the glue. I don't think he used that word, I think that's my word. But I love John, and I miss him, already miss him. One more thing. I think you're right. I think he knew. I think he knew it was serious. And the reason is we used to share a lot of text messages back and forth. And once he was sick, I would text him, and he would either reply with either "come see me," or he'd call me. So, my name is John.
And with that, I don't think he put his name in the program that he actually produced, so I'll let you know who's going to close this out. But this is John's brother-in-law, Andrew.
Thank you. My name is Andrew McFall, and I'm John's brother-in-law, live in Sarasota. And I did want to just confirm and reinforce that he was the best pumpkin carver, the master of handing out Christmas presents, and I can honestly tell you, I think he's wired just about everything in our house. And that's coming from someone that's not a little bit, I am technically challenged. So when you have the Wii all of a sudden magically work, or all of these things magically work, it's a true gift that he had there. But we wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. We appreciate your love, support, your learnings, the lessons that you've shared, and just all of the things that you've brought to us to celebrate John's life. He really did have an incredible impact, and I think we've all learned that and appreciate that so much. And I was speaking with someone that said, I don't think there's any one person in the room that could summarize that. It really takes the whole body of people here to really appreciate that. And that's happened somewhat on social media, and it's been a nice compilation of those things, but we really appreciate you each sharing your points. And there were some themes, and I'm a marketing and business person by background, so I'm always looking for the common themes, and I saw themes like serving others, loud and clear, dedicated and loyal. When he was supporting a cause, he was so loyal. And loyal to people as well, individuals, not just a group, but individual people. I think he got the job done. And I saw him get the job done in my house. And I saw him get the job, heard about him getting the job done. He was accountable, and you could count on John to get things done. And they were always for a good cause. And lastly, he was a good friend. We heard great examples of listening. And if you were following me in my business paths, I think that's a gift that's missing today. When you have a really good listener, it's so rare. And I think that really was a gift. So I believe that's it. We will miss him, but we appreciate all the great memories and the things that you've shared tonight. And we know that his legacy will live on. And we appreciate, again, everything that you've done with him over the years. And we look forward to the lives we're going to lead going forward and living his legacy. So I believe that wraps up for tonight. And is there anything else? Charlotte? I'm sorry, we have some drinks in the back, beverages.
You don't have to rush out. You don't also have to go home, but you can't stay here. But you can stay here for about another half hour or so. There are some refreshments, drinks in the back. Mix, mingle, say hello, and greet John's friends. That's what you would want.